Step into the Gardener's Lodge with me, Mykal. Let's explore the fascinating world of gardening, nature and ecology through conversations with experts, thought leaders, passionate enthusiasts and of course, some real good friends. All from the cosy heart of the lodge. Come on in. The Gardener's Lodge podcast is created on the traditional lands of the Darug and Gundungurra people in the Blue Mountains. We pay respect to all First Nations elders, past and present. Welcome to the show, and of course, Happy New Year. It is the first episode of 2026, which is super exciting, and no less, we are hitting in with a bang. We've got an amazing guest. His name is Andrew Fisher Tomlin. His accolades and his CV stretch as far as the eye can see. He is a founding director of the London College of Garden Design. He teaches planting design at Kew Gardens. He has been an educator or a judge for the Royal Horticultural Society Royal Chelsea Flower Show. He runs his own design firm, Fisher Tomlin and Bauer. And as if this man wasn't busy enough as it is, he has written his very first book, The Modern Professional Planting Designer. My chat with Andrew was amazing. It reached far and wide into his career, into the kind of the theory and the philosophy of planting design. And he was so generous with his time. I absolutely loved my chat with him. And without further ado, let's jump into our 6 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Favorite plant?
This week, Acacia brevisima, the Ovens wattle.
Favorite way to connect with nature?
I think just pottering in my own garden. I have a 20-second commute from the house down to my office. There's always a little bit of gardening gets done on every trip.
Oh, you've got to. Most beautiful garden or natural landscape you've ever visited?
I'd say the fjords, and I love fjords everywhere. I've still got to do the New Zealand fjords, but Norwegian fjords are amazing. But I actually think probably the bit I've been most wild by was Swedish Lapland, which is kind of inside the Arctic Circle, really far north. Going there in August, but there's still snow on the ground. Absolutely beautiful.
Favorite garden tool?
Oh, that's easy. My Felco's.
Yes.
A young Aussie gardener described my pair of Felco's as vintage.
If you could be one, would you be a plant or an animal?
A plant, a tree.
Nice. And finally, when you're looking for the most sound and reliable research, where do you go?
I'd probably go to the classroom. I have students with experience of things, particularly in gardening, and I take some of my, I'm looking for stuff. I say, what's your experience of that? And I get a lot from that, and a few colleagues as well.
What was your earliest memory of becoming enamored with gardens and with nature?
I think I'm like a lot of people who are in horticulture, in that it kind of seeps into you at a young age because of where you are. And even I know people who are kind of in urban settings who are like that. But mine was I grew up just near the Fens in East Anglia. My father had 3 allotments. He was a bit avid allotmenteer. My mum looked after the garden mostly. I actually grew up on somewhere called Clay Street, which says everything.
Yeah.
So we had fantastic roses, but every year there would be this big seething mass of farmyard manure arrive on our driveway, which was a tiny driveway, and the weekend would be spent, putting that in around the garden thing. So yeah, it's kind of that early memory of that. But eventually, I kind of decided what I wanted to do, and there were the horticultural people in my family, and that helped. I then went to Askham Bryan College in Yorkshire. So that's kind of where I come from, really. And my mum, who I lost early this year, she was an avid gardener.
I'm sorry.
But she has fine. I take comfort in the 93 years she had, and always loved the gardens. She introduced me to Chelsea Flower Show. She used to come down for the shows, and the last few years, because she wasn't so mobile and I couldn't be there all the time, we actually did a bit of an experiment in wilding her garden. So
Fabulous.
so it kind of like, people talk about wilding and rewilding. We kind of left it to see what happened. And it was amazing actually that we saw things like there's a local native, which is just an ordinary campagna.
Mm.
But it took over the garden at certain times of year, most beautiful. And all the people in the village would stop and talk to you about it and things and how wonderful it was. And you just think, yes, so why aren't you all doing this?
Yeah.
So there's kind of like, it's been all through my life, and my mum had a great hand in that.
She must be so proud of the career that you've created for yourself then. You've
Yeah.
run Fisher Tomlin and Bauer, your garden design firm. You have judged Royal Chelsea Flower Show. You have taught at Kew Gardens. I mean, you're a founding director of the London College of Garden Design, which is, your career is immense. And no less, you have written what is your first book?
Yeah, strangely, everyone's really surprised at that. Yeah, The Modern Professional Planting Designer. It is my first book. I've kind of contributed to books. I've contributed projects and things, but
Okay.
I've always been really, really busy. I love working in the industry, but I love every aspect of it. So I'm kind of one of those people that I'm a bit of a magpie. I kind of like, oh, I'm going to do that next. I'm going to do this. So,
Yeah.
so I kind of done lots of things. And the book thing, I've been asked to write books for years, but they were never the books I wanted to write. Didn't know
Sure.
what I wanted to write. My husband is an academic, writes loads of books, and I kind of saw the pain of writing a book, and
Yeah.
held back a bit. And a friend, Ian Hodgson, who's editor of Garden News, he's written books. So I took him out for lunch one day, and I said, "Tell me why I should be writing a book and what it is." And he said to me, "Don't write a pot boiler." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Don't write something you get enthusiastic for the first half, and then it just kind of sits there on the top of the stove, like boiling, bubbling away at you, going, 'You need to finish me.'"
Yeah, niggling at you in the background.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I thought about it for a long time, and my colleague Nina Baxter at London College of Garden Design said to me, you really ought to write planting design," and I kind of knew I should, because I've always been first and foremost a planting designer.
Hmm.
It's only in the last 15 years that I think it's a career that's been really recognised. I like to think, certainly people tell me this, that the planting design diploma that I started at London College of Garden Design has had a big hand in that, but also the support of people like Nigel Dunnett from the University of Sheffield, um, who's supported us all the way on that, has helped enormously. The sort of planting design as a standalone career is, I think, a relatively new thing.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
Garden designers, landscape architects would like to think they kind of invented it, but it's actually the gardeners that have been in gardens and estates for hundreds of years, who've always been planting designers, but actually I found that increasingly I was getting asked by people to come and redesign large areas of planting where they already had gardeners, but the gardeners didn't have time. I know we have all this mechanization and things that helps gardeners these days, but if you think, estates are run on quite low numbers these days compared to 200 years ago,
Oh, absolutely.
I was often being asked to give my specialist knowledge in that way. So the course we run at LCGD came out of me being frustrated at seeing the same planting design everywhere. This was
Mm.
about 15 years ago, and it had been kind of, that thought had been sitting with me for about 5 years. And I talked to my colleague Andrew Wilson and said, this is really frustrating at me. I've just been to Chelsea Flower Show. Everyone was doing the same sort of planting, and quite often with no link back to the narrative for the garden.
And what kind of planting was that at that time?
It was kind of a pseudo naturalistic type of planting.
Yeah.
People talking about, "Oh, I'm doing naturalistic planting," and in the middle of it would be a load of box balls. No, that's not natural. But the thing is, I think often with show gardens, people design their gardens, they get accepted, they work on all the structure and things, and then 6 months later, and maybe 6 months before the actual show, they suddenly start thinking about the plants, and they forget that they've got a narrative for their garden. They don't go back to that original narrative and say, "Well, what am I trying to achieve here? What's the story I'm telling?" And so quite often the planting didn't fit that. And so I thought, we're going down this route of everyone doing the same thing. And because of that, designers were using the 300 favorite plants that they had on a list all
Yeah.
the time. Nurseries were having less of a range of plants, and that's partly to do with designers using a limited palette of plants.
Mm.
And I really felt we could do something about that.
2026 is upon us, and I have limited spaces open for my garden coaching and consultation sessions. Whether you're looking for help with plant identification, advice on care and maintenance, or tips for improving your soil and plant nutrition, I'm here to help. As a garden designer, I'll help you think creatively about your outdoor space, offering tools and ideas to give you a fresh perspective on your garden projects. My coaching and consultation sessions can happen right in your garden if you live in the UK, or online if you're anywhere else in the world. My goal is to meet you where you are and support your unique garden journey. Whether you're just starting out, looking to refine your skills, or simply need a second opinion or someone just to bounce ideas off, you have found your space. Head to the link in this episode description or shoot me an email at hello@thegardenerslodge.co.uk. Cue the London College of Garden Design, of which you are a founding director and teacher there.
London College of Garden Design was set up about 20 years ago. It was set up by myself and two colleagues because, and we'd all been teaching at other places, but we were kind of a bit dissatisfied about what was being taught. They weren't teaching enough things like construction design, and so we kind of got together and we thought we can do our own thing, and do something. So we launched the garden design diploma first. Planting design diploma came a few years later, and now we have other CPD courses.
You teach the diploma of planting design. How has teaching and mentoring actually influenced your own design practice?
Teaching keeps you on your on your feet. I mean, it really informs you a lot. It makes you keep up to date with things, because you've got a classroom of people who want the latest information. And so we've also always at the college been very keen to have practicing experts, people who are out there doing it day to day as well as teaching it, because that's how you get the most up to date knowledge. Even if it's down to understanding how the climate has changed, because you're out there doing it all the time, and you can give
Yeah.
examples about things like, plants that are doing well, plants that aren't doing well, new materials that are out there. So that's been really, really important to me. I don't just teach at London College of Garden Design. Obviously we have London and Melbourne, but I also teach at the School of Horticulture in Kew Gardens,
Mhm.
and there I'm teaching people with the most amazing botanic minds.
Yeah.
The plants they know and the plants that they're enthusiastic about are often the plants that aren't very easily available or that you've never heard of. I learned so many new plants. It feels a bit naughty, really, that I'm being paid to go and listen to
Learn
people.
yourself a bit.
Yeah, and it's like, and they're quite often they're things that I'm not going to have the opportunity to use, but
No.
because, and I always joke that it takes me 2 or 3 times longer to mark their work than anybody else's, because half the plants I've never heard of. And and I have to remind people that there's I can't remember the exact figures. I think it's something like 250 million species in this world, and by all accounts, I cannot identify every one. But as a teacher, and so I love it because they're really interesting. They come up with really interesting ideas, kind of leading them through that. But I learn a lot from that. So definitely, teaching informs you hugely, and it's changed so much as well. It's very interactive. I'm a stickler for reviewing all my lectures every year, and quite often I would say on average my lectures are completely rewritten every 2 or 3 years,
Yeah, right.
and I think that keeps you fresh. And of course, if you're doing that, it's kind of like research. Writing a day's teaching is like researching. I love doing it. I'm always surprised that I kind of got into it, but now people are taking that expertise that I've got and doing it, looking at it in different ways and how I can help them. So my latest project, I've been taken on as consultant to the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. My remit is to reimagine um, and help them reimagine their planting for the next 100 years in the light
Wow.
of biodiversity crisis and changing climate.
So just a small task then.
Yeah, well, the commission, they look after 12,000 sites with horticulture around the world. I think 170
It's insane.
countries. And there's no way that I can do everyone, but and that's not the point. But it's the training background. It's the fact that I work in planting design. That's the key thing for them. And we're doing a very specific piece over the next few years, which will roll out. So to give power to the people in the organisation, the head gardeners and team leaders and people like that, who are really interested in plants, who kind of want to take things forward. And it's just such a delight to work for them because they come from a very strong horticultural background. I've always wanted to do something with them, and it's really really exciting.
What qualities do you think define a great planting designer in today's world?
So much about what we do is about communication. There's lots of talk about
True.
AI these days, but actually, at the moment, AI hasn't got the imagination and creativity that humans
Thank
have.
God.
Yeah, I mean, who knows whether that will come, but I think that's really, really important. I think an ability to slow down, what I call kind of slow planting, and really assess what's in front of you and to be innovative, to create new stories. So all that creative imagination is really important. The other part of it is an ability to advocate for planting. So much of this is about communication, how we communicate to clients, how we communicate to the wider public. I work in these days a lot in public space, and I find that I'm being called into projects early, which is great, but I'm still having to advocate for planting areas and diversity of planting and looking at planting in a sustainable way, but still trying to fight for respect within teams, because quite often architects, engineers, the person who's doing the costing of the project, they kind of have more weight in a team.
Yeah.
And that's kind of shocking, but the tide has turned, and I am getting involved in more things where, not like the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, where horticulture is a big part of what they do and they understand that, but in places like public parks, where they understand the value of what we do. But now also in corporate spaces like headquarters and things like that, where they understand that actually they can attract staff by having great outdoor space, because people value that much more now, and that's
right. Yeah.
great that we're kind of that we're going that way. But I think that ability of designers anyway, but planting design in particular, to kind of advocate for the value of planting and relate that back to whatever the client is looking for, I think is really is really important.
Absolutely. And I suppose you, as you've mentioned, the college has a campus in Melbourne.
Yes, yeah.
And beyond that, you've worked in Australia and New Zealand. And how did you end up on the other side of the world in my neck of the woods?
Well, the first time was I did a couple of gardens at Chelsea Flower Show in the 1990s. I never really got the bug for it. And then the RHS asked me to do things with them, and did that for a certain amount of time. And I thought, I don't want to do that anymore. And I fancy doing a show garden again. This was back in 2013, and I thought, oh shit, that's everyone's going to be looking, because I've been chairing, judging things for years. So I thought, where can I do it where if it all goes really badly, I can kind of be quiet about it. So I contacted my friend Kate Hillier, who was in New Zealand and ran the Ellerslie Flower Show, and I said, "Can I come and do a show garden there?" And so she goes, "Yeah, of course you can." So I went over there with a colleague of mine, Tom Halfley, and we did. I created a garden that I had in the back of my mind for a few years, because sometimes you need to look behind you. And the concept of it was, the idea behind it was that people buy tree seats, they have tree seats, and they have tree seats to sit under a tree, but primarily to look at the view. They don't look at the tree. And I
Mm.
thought, so I create with amazing joiner up in the north of the South Island. We designed a 36-seater circular bench that sat around one of the trees in the park in Christchurch and looked at the tree. So you sat and looked at the tree, and the
You looked
seat
back
was,
into it.
yeah, and the whole surround of it was tree ferns and things, so you couldn't really see a long distance view anyway. And
Yeah.
during the show, people came in. It had a seat that you could pull in to make a perfect circle. And people came in and paid reverence to that tree. They didn't touch it. They sat there quietly looking up into the tree and just kind of enjoying it. And that was the first garden, and that bench is, if you're in Christchurch, you can go and sit on that bench in the Botanic Gardens there.
It still exists.
It still exists. Yeah, yeah. We
Oh,
go into
amazing.
Botanic Garden. People send me photos of them sitting on it from all over the world. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
So I did that. I got back to the UK, and about a month later, Anthony Bastick from AGB Events in Sydney rang me up and said, "Would you come and be involved in the Australian Garden Show in Sydney?" And of course I did. Somebody says, "Can you come and create a garden? You need to be here for a month, and we're not going to judge you because it's just going to be a show feature." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm there." And so we did that. That was great fun. Largest garden I did at the time. Michael Bates built it for me. We had absolutely had a ball, because I literally got off the plane straight to the nurseries selecting plants. They said the only condition, a constraint we're going to put onto you, it has to be Australian natives.
Oh,
And I'm like,
not hard for an Englishman.
well, but it's also like, you just have the most amazing natives,
Yeah.
and you have 25,000. You only have about 3,000 non-natives.
Yeah.
And I kind of like, yeah, it's fine. The only thing I asked for was if I had somebody who was a nursery person who would stand next to me and go, "No, no, Andrew, that's not a native." So I didn't have to look it all up, because I was going around these noses like, yeah, I was like a kid in a sweet shop in these nurseries, and she was great. She really helped me out, and we created this garden called September Sky, and it was kind of my idea about what Australia was like, and these kind of big, wide open skies,
Mm.
and land and country, and everything they thought of. Because I'd only ever been to Australia twice before. Once through the airport in Sydney on the way to New Zealand, and the second time for 3 nights to come and launch his show. So it's kind of was my idea, and we worked alongside a number of other Australian designers. They all came when they were looking at my garden one day. I found them all standing, and I said, "Well, is something wrong?" And they said, "Oh, it's just that you can tell that you're not an Australian designer." I said, how? And they started to tell me about how I set plants out. And I realized what it was they were all doing very ornamental planting, and I was doing very naturalistic planting.
Yeah.
It was kind, and one of them said, "This is just like my mum's garden in the bush." And I thought, that's
Huh.
praise indeed. I was
Yeah.
like, wow, and people came along, and they looked, they got involved in it, and it was great to kind of engage people as somebody who's from outside the country with plants that they knew and how I'd put them together. And we kind of had this underlying story about, when you scratch the surface of Australia, you find treasure, and it kind of keyed into stories at the time about the use of resources in Australia and
Hmm.
and lots of other things that were going on about nature and things. So we kind of put things in that we didn't tell people about. It was only if you kind of walked through the garden and noticed them you would know. So things like where the quarry had scratched the rocks using the machinery, I put gold leaf on the rock. So you kind of went, oh, so people, you
Oh.
could hear people going, "Oh my God, look, there's gold in that rock," and it kind of like, no, there's not, but it's kind of part of the story.
Yeah.
Just before the show opened, Anthony said to me, he said, I think it's amazing this story that you've got running through this garden. I didn't know you could kind of do stories from gardens like this. And I think I said to him, "What like what do you mean?" He said, "Well, like referencing the national flower of Australia, within that garden, and and your whole story about gold and things." And I was like,
Mm.
"Have I? I didn't know this."
You just nod and agree.
Yeah, so I kind of straight off to Google like what's the national flower of Australia, and of course it's the golden wattle.
Yeah, Acacia pycnantha. Yeah, golden wattle.
And I kind of thought I need to understand it. I need to know. I will see. So this young woman who was helping me from the nursery, I rang her and said, "Can you get me some golden wattles? I'd love to have them in the garden." And she actually managed to find some in time for the first day. And I
Oh,
thought
good.
I need to find out, why it's the national flower of Australia. And of course, it was introduced by I think the second Prime Minister of Australia. Bizarrely, it's Andrew Fisher. Um,
Oh,
I,
there you go.
yeah, I mean, that's amazing. It was kind of like, oh my goodness, we really need this. And of course, I then, through the press day and everything, it was like, of course, it was all preempted, pre-thought out. but
Aren't I clever?
but yeah, but it's kind of interesting how you get these stories out to plants, and how they can connect with you in different ways. And
Good.
it amazes me that you kind of doing one thing and there's something comes along that connects into
Something
this.
comes out of it. Well,
Yeah,
I suppose that's like the interesting thing with planting design and, or I guess garden design really, is that it is an art form, People would look at a painting and they'll derive a meaning out of it. And that is still so true with gardens, if you're looking at it and thinking
yeah. I
deeply
mean,
about it.
if we look at what I think of as one of the first naturalistic planting movements, which was the picturesque in the 18
Yes.
I think 1820s to 40s, that was all based on putting plants together, and they were non-native plants together in a natural way, based on landscape painting. So sort of nature imitating art in that way. What we talk about as naturalistic planting now is in many ways just a repackaged version for the 21st
Mm.
century.
So let's jump straight into your new book, The Modern Professional
Yeah,
Planting Designer. What was the process for writing this insanely, incredibly thorough book?
I think I wrote it to get a lot of things for me to get a lot of things out of my
Yes.
mind and off my
That's
plate.
literally my
I
next
think
question, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I think it was a way of saying I've got it of all this stuff that's going on in my head that I wanted to say, and it was a good way of putting it down there. And so I was writing it, but also still teaching. And so when quite a lot of it I teach in another way, but I do talk about it to students. And so I was taking chapters and kind of saying, using it as a kind of a day's teaching to say kind of like, does this make sense? How do you do it? And because writing a book is very different from
Mm.
teaching, because you're not in the room when somebody's reading it to answer people's questions. And so I made sure I kind of talked about these subjects, and when students asked questions, I quickly wrote them down so that
So you could
make
clarify.
sure I'd covered it in the
Yeah.
book. Yeah, and also to kind of things. There was one particular thing that one student asked me about, and I was like, oh, I can't believe I've not written about that yet. So kind of that went in. So the audience really is primarily professional. It's particularly for it's an academic book in that
Yeah.
way for students, but it's also really relevant, I think, for people who are really keen garden enthusiasts. But it's but when I say professionals, it's for it's for people who are working in gardening, in horticulture, in botanic gardens as much it is for somebody who wants to be a designer. And a lot of the work I do teaching now at Kew for the Commonwealth Walgraves Commission things is all about giving gardeners and horticulturists the design skills or the design language to be able to sell their work. Because there are people who say, oh, we don't need designers, but I find that designers are very good at getting the money to the table.
Mm.
It's the gardeners who are going to implement our designs and also look
Care
after
for them,
them
yeah.
and make us look good. And we kind of need to all be working together in that sense.
Absolutely.
And so this book is for kind of all those people, really. And I've been really encouraged by messages I've had from all over the world, from people I've never met before, saying how much it's kind of changed how they look at things, or given a structure to what they've always
I
thought. So it's kind
completely
of
agree. Like when I picked it up in a bookshop probably a month and a half ago, and I started reading it.
yeah,
And, a lot of the kind of intellectual things that, yeah, as you say, you're in your brain, but you may
yeah,
not have actually kind of really fleshed out. You've got in here, and there's so many points in here that I go, of course, yes. What I love about it too is it's a beautiful book. So it's not just a boring textbook. I studied
yeah.
journalism; those textbooks were hell. Um, and but this is beautiful to look at, as it should be. But there's such dense information, and you've provided such beautiful illustrations and infographics, and of course just like beautiful images of gardens and whatnot. What was the
Yeah,
process of putting
yeah.
together those images and those infographics?
The publishers have got a reputation for really high quality imagery in their books.
That's
And
Rizzoli, New York.
Rizzoli, yeah, and they are kind of known for books on interiors and art and things like that. And they've only very recently really expanded into what I would say was the green world. So I kind of I wrote the book, so kind of the copy of it, and I would come across images and things, but the imagery was a whole separate thing, and it needed illustration as well. And so this hand illustration, which was completed for me by Duncan Cargill, who was originally one of my students,
Mm,
and he comes from the advertising world and great on graphics. And so I had some very clear ideas about what I wanted to show, but we also had conversations about how the best way to show these things. And so there's all those hand illustrations, and I didn't really think at the time, but I think hand illustration is really, really important as a skill for planting designers. The ability to create 2D drawings in elevation and then maybe in perspectives, but also to kind of do quick sketching,
mm,
to think, to work through ideas and explore your design is really, really important. It's much more important than being able to use
yeah.
CAD.
CAD is computer aided design. It's software used by designers of all types, engineers, architects, garden designers, probably furniture designers. Anyone that's doing design will use CAD at some point to formalize their designs.
It's not really until the end that you get a bit of CAD. And I know there's quite a lot of people who are quite relieved, because there's a lot of people who just want to concentrate on plants and planting and gardening, and they don't want to go through thousands of dollars to learn CAD, and you don't need to for planting design. And so
No.
so that those illustrations really important. But interestingly, unlike most publishers, what Rizzoli do is they they set all the images first, and then they drop the copy in around it, which is a little bit
Interesting.
of a challenge for me to make sure the photos are matching up with the copy. But it was relatively painless,
Mm.
that
I
whole
guess it almost
process.
gives you a bit of a guideline as well.
Yeah, I mean, they said to me, "Oh, don't worry about the captions. Just do get the images together." And it probably took me a full month's working to do that. But actually, I had to write. For me, I had to write the captions as I went along, because if I went back to them later, I think, well, why did I choose that? A
Yeah.
picture of a bioswale in Singapore. What was that about? So I those are all written at the same time. And as I said earlier, I love a spreadsheet. And so this book was meticulously planned out on spreadsheets, as were all the imagery and things like that. So I think my editor Stacey was quite happy about that.
What is the one kind of big core idea from this book that you want to distill to the reader?
Blimey, one big core idea. I actually think it probably is about the importance of storytelling in planting, and that idea of either a very functional narrative, which might be about color palettes. I mean, someone like James Hitchell or Nigel Dunnett in Sheffield, they much concentrate on a kind of people first way of designing with plants, and often that comes from color, which is a very sort of functional narrative. Or you might talk about conceptual narratives. It might be to do with heritage and story, and that's something I see really well done in Australia, funnily enough.
Do you have a sunny space in your garden that you just don't know what to do with? Well, I have a treat for you. A free perennial garden design that you can download right now. It's full of colour and year-round interest, and the best part is that it's pollinator and wildlife attracting. It's been designed with the UK climate in mind, but I know I've got listeners across the globe. So if you're in the southern states of Australia or the northern part of the US, this is the design for you. You can download your free perennial garden design, as well as my free Australian native garden design at the link in the description.
I think the other thing is, and part of the thing that people kept saying to me, students kept saying to me, is I've got all these different planting books by different people talking about what they do, but I don't know how it all fits together. So I think overall, the important thing I've done is kind of contextualized all these different things that are happening in the world of planting at the moment, particularly around structure, whether things are ornamental or naturalistic or they're wild, and how do I, if I want to create something that's naturalistic, what are my options? How can I approach it? And so I've concentrated on there really on kind of the really well-known modern approaches, kind of 21st century approaches to them, because they're still being experimented with, and particularly wilding and rewilding is kind of a big experiment for people at the moment.
Yeah.
And I always say to people, if they want to do that, you kind of need to define what you mean by that. But I kind of contextualize all those different ways of planting, because most of us can't be a Nigel Dunnett or James Hitchell. We can't concentrate on one area. For most of us, we kind of need to have a big toolbox to,
Be a bit general.
if we're working things. Yeah, well, just and also it's that thing, like you can only dismiss one way of doing things if you understand what that way is. You can't just dismiss it by hand because aesthetically it doesn't work for you. It works for other people, and so I think that's quite important. I've been asked to talk to a group in Sheffield called Talking Plants. It's an amazing group that's been put together by some designers, and I kind of decided, because Sheffield is kind of the focus of naturalistic planting in a way in this country and things, I kind of thought I'm going to actually go up there and make a case for ornamental planting, so that we don't forget that there are other tools available.
That's actually a really interesting point. I suppose garden design, and I get really design generally, often just follows trends, and often can dump out a lot of stuff behind it that they don't want anymore, or don't see value in anymore. But one thing I think that the UK is really good at is looking back and holding on to heritage, and making sure that our story through garden is maintained.
At the moment, the Gardens Trust is under threat of being taken off sort of mandatory planning applications for heritage sites, which is really sad. They're kind of almost downsizing the role of landscapes with heritage sites. And you're right. I mean, we have so much heritage in the UK, and the gardens are often a really important part of that. So there's kind of threats there and
Oh,
things.
that's interesting. Oh, that would be such a big shame, really, wouldn't it?
Mm.
In that vein, what do you see the role is for garden designers and planting designers, moving into the uncertain future of, climate crisis and biodiversity loss and all of those fun topics?
It's a growing role. I think the importance is that I always teach students now is that you need to understand ecology and how we sit within nature, because it's absolutely valid that you know as humans we're not separate from nature, we are part of nature.
Mm.
And you need to be able to talk about gardens in that way. There's been some recent research, although this has been stuff that's been out for many years. I remember hearing this 20 years ago, but the total area of our gardens in the UK is equivalent to about 4.5% of the landmass. That's bigger than our
Wow.
national. That's bigger than our national parks. And if you think about how the concentration of those can be in urban and suburban areas, this is kind of massive wildlife park you have in
Yeah.
places. They're linked up. Where my garden is 50 square meters. It has. I'm looking out at it now. It has a lot of non-natives, um, being the UK anyway it is, but I kind of like unusual plants. But it's got, there's birds have been sitting in the garden going round. On the other side of my garden, is a garden with absolutely no plants in. It's got artificial turf. It's got brickwork. That's it.
No.
The other side, my next door neighbour has just planted up with my help, and I kind of got her lots of plants, and then I suddenly found she'd set them all out and planted them, and it was because she was using ChatGPT to. But it's fine because she really got into it. She knew that one side was shady and one side was sunny, and she got into it. And it's the first time in 3 years she's been there that I've seen her kind of engage in nature in that way, and that's brilliant.
Okay.
And then and over the back of me, there's two really wild gardens. There's elderly people who don't do a lot of gardening, but that's where the foxes have family every year and things like that, and it's brilliant. It's kind of like, so then I look out into the street, and there's trees being planted. We have to pay for them now. The local authority doesn't have the budgets for that, but we put them in. There's somebody in the street who's responsible for a campaign in our local borough, where those spaces underneath trees, which are usually kind of barren soil and things, are now being
Yeah.
planted up by people. And
Good.
people taking responsibility for the space outside her. I mean, in Melbourne, you have trees with email addresses, so that if there's anything wrong with that tree, you can write to them, and the local authority picks it up. How brilliant is that? So I think,
Yeah.
but I think we can, as designers, we can talk about all these things. We can engage people in that way, and yes, things like wild natural gardens are beautiful. Some people don't think they're gardens. I do. They're just a
I do
different
too. Yeah.
aesthetic. And we can we don't have to have that over 100% of our garden. We can do things like allow for the space behind the shed to just go wild. We don't have to be tidy all the time.
Mm.
We can explain to our customers, the holy grail of garden design from clients is they want no or low maintenance. They want some
Of course.
screening, from people, and they want all year round colour and interest.
Yeah.
That last one is kind of the hardest one.
Of
But
course.
I
Yeah.
always say with the maintenance thing, that if you don't want the maintenance, you can still have these amazing borders, and they're going to peak at various times through the year. We can you could, in a small garden, you might just have a big summer peak and everything, and you can just let them die down naturally. Do a bit of a
Yeah.
clear up in the spring. We're providing shelter and food, hopefully water, certainly places to bring out young for wildlife. That's kind of all what it needs, and that's what we do. And it's low maintenance.
And by
Sometimes,
doing so, you're helping,
yeah,
pollinators over
yeah,
winter. You're also protecting the soil over the cooler
yeah,
months. It's
exactly.
it makes a lot more sense, really. But of course, not everyone wants that, nor should they. But I
No,
think it's an interesting point that you said. Was it 4.5%
yeah,
of the UK landmass is
yeah, yeah,
gardens?
yeah.
I mean,
I mean,
that
we're a
says
we're a very small island with a lot of people on,
Yes.
it's like, and that's what we always have to remember. But yeah, I actually don't think we're a nation of gardeners.
Mm.
People say, oh, the British are a nation of gardeners. We're a nation of bird watchers because there's more members of the Royal Society of Protection of Birds than there are from the Royal Society of Horticulture.
Interesting.
And I
Yeah.
think, but you can, but also with clients who are perhaps not so engaged with their garden, and let's face it, people are coming, if they come to me for a garden and they don't know what to do, they kind of just want a nice space out there. They
You
might
do it.
not, they
Yeah.
might, they yeah, they might not be interested in sustainability. They might not be interested in wildlife. They just want a nice garden to go out and entertain in and things. So I do what I call sustainability by stealth. I just don't really
Yeah.
talk about it. I do all these things which are right, maximizing the planting and the permanent vegetative biomass and things like this, and making sure they have composting, so it's a no waste garden. It's kind of and that's that. But I don't talk about it in terms of sustainability. I talk about it in terms of, well, this is going to be much cheaper for you. This is going to be much lower maintenance for you,
Yeah.
and do it that way, so that kind of you're doing the sustainability, that I think is really, really important for the future, but you're kind of doing it under the radar, really.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that with that, 4.5%, I'm hanging on to it,
Yeah,
of land mass being gardens. I think we as gardeners, but as designers and planting designers, have a responsibility to make sure that that space is cared for in a way and encouraged to be better than it has been in the past, through,
yeah, and I think from that point of view, we really need to be concentrating on biodiversity,
yeah.
and it's you can do it in really simple ways. Local authorities have lists of the trees that they've planted in your street. As a designer, choose plants which are more diverse, different. I have colleagues who are really pro using native plants, and I agree, native plants can be important. But in the UK, there are native plants that are struggling with climate change. And so we need
Mm.
to be thinking about what else we can be growing, that's still going to have kind of the benefits to people and wildlife, and biodiversity within a changing climate.
What is next for you? Are you more writing? What projects? Obviously, you can continue teaching.
I was word out. Everyone says, "Well, what are you going to write next?" And I'm actually at the moment more of a thing is like one is enough. That's it.
Okay.
So I don't know.
I mean, you
I've
have
got.
written the ultimate book here, like.
Well, that's good then. Hopefully it'll keep in print. It'll help me in my old age.
Yeah.
They I've got this big project with the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. I'm getting asked to do some interesting stuff in public spaces. Recently, we opened a quiet garden in Holland Park, and I'm very interested in social and therapeutic horticulture, and we've worked with hospices and people like blind veterans and things like that. So there'll be more of that, a bit more teaching, a bit more traveling. I'm trying to do less now, and kind of because I can see retirement, but kind of when we're in horticulture, kind of retirement is usually just about doing a bit less of what you've already been doing because you love it so
That's right.
much.
Thank you so, so, so much for your time, Andrew. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. You're very welcome.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you like the show, don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button. Tell a friend or two, or maybe even give the show a 5-star rating and a review. If you want more Gardeners Lodge content, you can find our website, our Instagram, and our TikTok in the show notes below this episode. The Gardeners Lodge podcast is a growing media production.